After marrying into the Pei family, Qiao Lan devoted everything to her husband's declining noble house. She gave them wealth, status, and the luxurious life they enjoyed for 3 years, yet no matter how much she sacrificed, she was never truly accepted. Her mother-in-law despised her merchant background, the servants looked down on her. And the man she loved most, Pei Jingyuan, remained cold and indifferent to all her suffering. Still, Qiao Lan endured everything, because she believed that one day, her sincerity would melt even the coldest heart. Yet after everything she had suffered, what came next would be far worse. For 3 years after marrying into the Pei family, Qiao Lan lived like a shadow inside her own marriage. Everyone in the capital envied her. They believed she was lucky. A merchant's daughter marrying into the prestigious Pei family was considered a blessing beyond measure. Only Qiao Lan knew the truth. That beautiful marriage was nothing more than a gilded cage. 3 years ago, the Pei family had stood at the edge of ruin. Their businesses were collapsing. Their debts had piled like mountains. Even the servants had begun secretly stealing valuables to prepare for the family's fall. At that desperate moment, Qiao Lan entered their lives. As the only daughter of the wealthiest merchant family in Jiangnan, her dowry shocked the entire capital. Hundreds of chests of gold and silver entered the Pei mansion. Shops, tea estates, silk businesses, storehouses filled with luxury goods. She brought enough wealth to save a dying Pei family, and she did exactly that. Within 1 year, the Pei family rose again, their businesses recovered, their debts vanished, their reputation returned. The once declining noble house regained its glory. Everyone praised young Master Pei Jingyuan. They called him talented, brilliant, capable. No one knew that behind his restored success stood one woman, Qiao Lan. She never asked for credit. She never demanded gratitude. All she wanted was simple: to be accepted, to be seen as family. But reality was cruel. No matter how much wealth she brought, Madame Pei never accepted her in her eyes. Merchant blood was forever inferior to noble blood. But never status. That was what Madame Pei believed, and she made sure Qiao Lan never forgot it. Every family banquet, every tea gathering, every social event, Madame Pei would remind everyone of Qiao Lan's origins, subtly, cruelly, relentlessly. Even the servants learned quickly. The mistress of the house had no one protecting her, so they grew bolder. They bowed to her in public, but mocked her in private, calling her the merchant wife, the Bob Madam, the woman who purchased her husband with money. Each word cut like a blade. Yet none of those wounds hurt as much as one man's indifference. Pei Jingyuan, her husband, the man she had quietly loved for years. He saw his mother belittle her. He heard the servants mock her. He knew the loneliness she endured, yet he remained silent. Always silent, as if none of it concerned him, as if her suffering were insignificant. Still, Qiao Lan endured because she believed that sincerity could warm even the coldest heart. She believed if she waited long enough, if she loved hard enough, one day Pei Jingyuan would finally look at her. That illusion shattered on a quiet autumn afternoon. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed across the mansion. Servants rushed toward the front gate, their faces filled with excitement. Even Madame Pei, who usually maintained noble composure, could not hide her joy. Qiao Lan felt a knees rise in her chest. Something was wrong, very wrong. Then she heard the name that turned her blood cold. Li Ruyu had returned. Qiao Lan froze where she stood. Her fingers slowly tightened around the teacup. Li Ruyu, Pei Jingyuan's first love, the woman he had never forgotten, and the woman who was never supposed to return. The teacup slipped from Qiao Lan's hand. It shattered across the floor at that moment. For the first time in 3 years, fear began creeping into her heart. Before Qiao Lan could steady her breathing, hurried footsteps filled the corridor. Servants rushed past her one after another. No one stopped. No one greeted her. No one cared that the lawful young madam was standing there. All their attention was drawn toward the entrance of the hall. Qiao Lan remained beside the tea table, where she had always stood, as part of her usual place in the inner hall. As if she had already learned where she was allowed to exist, Madame Pei sat at the main seat with her usual cold dignity, but even she slowly lifted her gaze toward the entrance. Something was coming. Something that made the entire atmosphere shift. Then footsteps echoed inside the hall, slow, deliberate, and completely different from the servants rushing earlier. The doors to the inner hall opened and two figures stepped inside. The first was Pei Jingyuan. Pei Jingyuan, tall, composed, as cold and distant as always. But behind him, a woman followed closely. And the moment she appeared, the air inside the hall changed. Li Ruyu. She moved with gentle elegance. Every step was light and graceful. Every movement carried a refined beauty that naturally drew every gaze in the room, soft, fragile, and impossible to ignore. Madame Pei's expression changed instantly. The cold composure she always maintained softened for the first time that day. Warmth appeared in her eyes, a warmth Qiao Lan had never once received. Not in 3 years, not even once. Qiao Lan stood still beside the tea table. Her hands tightened slightly around the tray. But she did not move. She could not move. Something inside her chest felt heavier with every passing second. Pei Jingyuan stepped further into the hall. His gaze swept across the room, detached, uninterested, until it landed on Li Ruyu, and for the first time, something subtle changed in his expression. A softness, a familiarity, something that did not belong to Qiao Lan. Madame Pei immediately rose from her seat. Her voice turned noticeably warmer as she welcomed Li Ruyu. Servants moved quickly to adjust the hall, their urgency no longer chaotic, but purposeful, as if their arrival had redefined everything inside the mansion. And yet, Qiao Lan noticed something else. No one looked at her, not a single glance. It was as if she had already become part of the background, something present, but irrelevant. Li Ruyu lowered her gaze slightly, her expression gentle and modest. But her presence remained the center of the entire hall. She did not need to speak. She did not need to demand attention. The hall itself had already chosen her. Then Qiao Lan finally saw it. Servants were moving toward the inner courtyard, carrying boxes, furniture, silk bedding, jewelry cabinets. Her heartbeat suddenly quickened, a cold unease spread through her chest. No, something was wrong. Then she saw her personal maid being pushed aside by senior servants. The girl looked terrified, trying to speak, but no one allowed her. Qiao Lan's breathing turned shallow. Then a familiar carved rosewood box passed in front of her eyes. She froze. That box belonged to her. Inside were letters she had written to Pei Jingyuan over the years, letters she never dared to give him. One servant accidentally dropped the box. The lid opened. Letters scattered across the floor, like fragments of something that once held her heart together. No one stopped. One servant even stepped on them while walking past, crushing them without hesitation. Qiao Lan felt something inside her break silently. She finally understood. Those servants were not reorganizing the house. They were removing her presence from it. The room she had lived in as Pei Jingyuan's wife for 3 years was being emptied. Her fingers slowly clenched, her nails dug into her palm, yet she felt no pain, because something far deeper was already hurting. Her heart, and deep inside, she already knew. What came next would destroy the last illusion she still held. The Pei mansion had entered a new rhythm, subtle, but impossible to ignore. Qiao Lan noticed it through small things first. The monthly silk orders arrived without passing through her hands. Kitchen expenses were approved without her seal. Even the servants had begun reporting elsewhere. At first, she said nothing. Until one afternoon, she stepped into Madame Pei's courtyard carrying the account books for this month's household expenses, but the moment she reached the doorway, her steps halted inside the room. Li Ruyu sat beside Madame Pei. Several ledgers were spread open on the table. Madame Pei was explaining something patiently, her finger tracing numbers across the pages. This account is for the inner kitchen. This one records fabric purchases for seasonal clothing. Li Ruyu listened attentively. nodding softly, her expression gentle and eager to learn. Madame Pei's usually stern face carried rare warmth, a kind of patience Qiao Lan had never received, not once in 3 years. Qiao Lan stood at the entrance, silent, unmoving. The account books in her hands suddenly felt heavier. Madame Pei finally noticed her. Her warm expression faded slightly. "Why are you standing there?" Qiao Lan lowered her gaze. "I came to deliver this month's expense records." Madame Pei glanced at the books briefly, then looked away. "No need from now on. Ryu will assist with household management." The words were simple, almost casual, yet they landed heavily. Qiao Lan remained still. Madame Pei continued as if discussing something insignificant. "You may rest from these duties. Your health has always been weak. Ryu is more suitable for this work." Suitable? That single word cut deeper than open criticism because it carried final judgment, not temporary help replacement. Qiao Lan slowly tightened her fingers around the ledgers. The edges pressed into her palm, but her face remained calm. Across the table, Li Ruyu looked up. There was apology on her face, at least. Something that resembled apology. "I only wanted to help." Her voice was soft, harmless. But somehow it made everything worse because everyone in that room understood the truth. Help was never the point, taking her place was. Qiao Lan's eyes lowered again. And in that quiet moment, she finally saw it clearly. No one intended to push her out with force. They did not need to. They would simply replace her, piece by piece, until one day, nothing in this mansion would belong to her anymore. The night of New Year should have been warm. Red lanterns swayed beneath the carved beams of the Pei mansion. Inside the main hall, laughter and music blended with the fragrance of wine and incense. Everything looked festive. Outside, snow fell silently, cold and merciless. Qiao Lan sat near the side of the hall, quiet as always. Then a servant rushed in. In his trembling hands was a broken jade bracelet. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Qiao Lan recognized it at once. It belonged to Li Ruyu. Li Ruyu stepped forward, her face pale. Her delicate fingers trembled as she took the bracelet. "I only left it for a moment in a side room. I never thought it would disappear." Her voice was soft, fragile. No accusation was spoken, yet everyone understood. A servant suddenly knelt. "Young master, we found this inside young madam's room." The servant raised a small jade clasp. A missing piece of the bracelet. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Every gaze turned toward Qiao Lan like blades, cold and merciless. Qiao Lan's expression did not change. She already understood. This was a trap, a clumsy one. Yet she also knew something worse. The truth would not matter tonight. Madame Pei's face darkened. "How shameless. For a bracelet you would stoop this low." Qiao Lan finally spoke. "I did not take it." Her voice was calm, steady. But Madame Pei's expression only grew colder. Li Ruyu bit her lip. Tears gathered in her eyes. "Sister, if you wanted it, you could have asked me." That sentence was worse than direct accusation, because it painted Qiao Lan as both thief and jealous woman. Qiao Lan slowly turned her gaze toward Pei Jingyuan. He stood beneath the lantern light. She waited. Not for trust, just one question, one word, anything. But he said nothing, not a single word. Her heart suddenly became very quiet. Madame Pei's voice broke the silence. "Kneel." Qiao Lan did not move. Two servants forced her down. Her knees hit stone hard. Pain shot upward instantly. Madame Pei's voice was merciless. "You will kneel in the snow until you admit your wrongdoing." No one objected, not even Pei Jingyuan. The courtyard was already white with snow. Qiao Lan was forced outside. Her thin robes offered little warmth. Snow landed on her shoulders, her hair, her lashes. The cold seeped into bone. Inside the mansion, music resumed, laughter resumed. The banquet continued, as if nothing had happened. That was the cruelest part. Not the cold, not the humiliation, but how easily the world moved on without her. Hours passed, no one came, no one called her name, no one saved her, not Madame Pei, not Li Ruyu, not even Pei Jingyuan. At some point, Qiao Lan stopped shivering, stopped hoping, stopped hurting. The cold outside was no longer colder than the emptiness inside her chest. Then something changed. Quietly, completely. The woman who had entered the Pei mansion 3 years ago with love in her heart, died in the snow that night. When dawn came, Qiao Lan slowly opened her frozen eyes. There were no tears, no grievance, no heartbreak, only clarity. At last, she understood. Love could not warm a heart made of stone, and if this mansion wanted to bury her, then she would bury them first. Days later, Pei Jingyuan came to Qiao Lan's courtyard alone. The winter air was cold, yet colder still was the silence between them. Qiao Lan sat beside the table, reviewing ledgers under lamplight. She did not rise to greet him. She simply closed the account book. Pei Jingyuan looked at her for a moment. Something about her felt unfamiliar, distant, unreadable. Finally, he spoke. I came to inform you of something. Qiao Lan waited silently. I will marry Li Ruyu. The words fell heavily into the room. Pei Jingyuan watched her closely, waiting for pain, for anger, for tears at the very least. Some visible reaction. But Qiao Lan only lowered her eyes briefly. Then spoke in a calm voice, I do not agree. Pei Jingyuan's expression darkened. This is not for your agreement. It is my decision. Qiao Lan lifted her gaze. Her eyes were calm. Then I want a divorce. Silence, complete silence. Pei Jingyuan stared at her as if he had misheard. Divorce, that word sounded absurd coming from her. The woman who once loved him enough to endure everything should have been crying right now. Begging, refusing, making a scene. But the woman before him looked as if she were discussing business. Nothing more. Pei Jingyuan's voice turned colder. Are you threatening me? No. Qiao Lan answered immediately. I am leaving, with or without your permission. That sentence struck him unexpectedly. Something sharp tightened in his chest. He narrowed his eyes. Fine, if you insist on divorce, then do not regret it. Qiao Lan reached beside her and placed a stack of documents before him. Everything under my name returns to me, every estate, every business, every account tied to the Qiao family. Nothing remains in the Pei household. Pei Jingyuan's gaze fell onto the papers, then his expression changed slightly. These documents were already prepared, sealed, organized. This was not impulse. She had planned this. For days, perhaps longer. An unfamiliar irritation rose inside him. For some reason, this anger felt heavier than her objection to his second marriage. He said coldly, So this is about money. Qiao Lan looked at him quietly. No, this is about ending what should have ended long ago. Pei Jingyuan's jaw tightened. Without another word, he grabbed the seal and pressed it down onto the divorce papers. The red mark bloomed. Final. Irreversible. Qiao Lan picked up the papers calmly, folded them carefully. Not long after Qiao Lan left the courtyard, a servant hurried to report the matter to Madame Pei. Young master has signed the divorce papers. Madame Pei paused for a moment, then she laughed. A mocking laugh filled the room. Divorce. That woman will regret this soon enough. She took a slow sip of tea. Without the Pei family, she is nothing. The Pei mansion began collapsing faster than anyone expected at first. The changes were subtle. Delayed payments, missing cash flow. Merchants requesting settlement earlier than usual. But within days, the problems became impossible to ignore. To major suppliers suspended deliveries. 3 business partners withdrew their cooperation. Even several shop managers began sending urgent reports. Losses, debt, frozen accounts, bad news piled up one after another. Inside the main hall, Madame Pei's expression turned uglier by the day. Her voice grew sharper, her temper shorter. She demanded answers from everyone. But no one could give her one. No one understood why the Pei family's finances were suddenly crumbling. Only one person slowly began noticing the pattern. Pei Jingyuan. He sat alone in his study late into the night, ledgers spread across the table. His brows furrowed deeper with every page. Something felt wrong, not just wrong, missing. Then realization slowly crept in. Several support channels had vanished. Hidden capital reserves were gone. Emergency funds had disappeared. Trade guarantees had been withdrawn. His fingers tightened over the ledger. He finally understood. Those were not Pei family resources. They had belonged to Qiao Lan, or more precisely, the Qiao family for 3 years. Qiao Lan had quietly supported the Pei family far more than he ever realized, and he had never known. Or perhaps, he had never cared to know. A strange heaviness settled in his chest. That night, Pei Jingyuan returned to his courtyard later than usual. Exhaustion weighed on every step. Instinctively, his eyes moved toward the tea table. And he stopped. The table was empty. No warm tea waited for him. No lamp had been left burning. No quiet figure sat nearby waiting for his return. Only silence, cold and empty. His breathing slowed. A memory surfaced without warning. Qiao Lan sitting beside the lamp, waiting silently night after night. Even when he ignored her, even when he never thanked her, she still waited, always. His chest tightened unexpectedly. For the first time, the mansion felt unfamiliar. Not because something had been added, but because something essential was gone. And only now did he begin to understand its weight. 3 days after leaving the Pei mansion, Qiao Lan personally visited one of the Qiao family's trading houses. Since reclaiming control of her family's assets, she had been busier than ever. Ledgers, contracts, merchant meetings, trade route negotiations. Her days were full, exhausting, yet strangely freeing. For the first time in years, every decision she made belonged to herself. Inside the trading hall, a negotiation was underway. A middle-aged merchant sat across from Qiao Lan. His tone remained polite at first. But as the discussion continued, impatience surfaced. When Qiao Lan refused to lower the price, the merchant gave a dry laugh. "Miss Qiao, business is not embroidery. It is not something women can manage with elegance alone. Perhaps this matter should be discussed with a man instead." The hall fell silent. Qiao Lan remained calm. Her expression did not change. She slowly closed the ledger before her, then lifted her gaze. "If your profits have fallen for 3 consecutive quarters, perhaps the problem lies not in my gender, but in your competence." The merchant's face darkened instantly. "You." Before he could continue, a cold voice cut through the hall. "She is correct." Everyone turned toward the entrance. A tall figure stepped inside. Dark robes embroidered with silver threads. His presence alone made the entire atmosphere turn heavy. Powerful, untouchable. The guards behind him bowed their heads in disciplined silence. No introduction was needed. Everyone recognized him instantly. Prince Xiaoyan, the emperor's younger brother, Ruyu. The merchant's face turned pale. He immediately bent his back. "Your Highness." Xiaoyan barely spared him a glance. "Your grain routes in the western sector have been failing for months. Yet instead of fixing your losses, you blame a woman for exposing them." Sweat rolled down the merchant's neck. His arrogance vanished completely after a hurried apology. He practically fled. Silence filled the hall. Qiao Lan looked at Xiaoyan. Why would a royal prince come personally to a trading house? Xiaoyan's gaze met hers, calm, unreadable. "I came to discuss trade routes with the Qiao family. The northern routes interest me." So this was business. That made sense, yet something felt strange. He could have sent subordinates. A prince of his status rarely handled such matters personally. Qiao Lan gestured toward the inner chamber. "Your Highness, please." They moved into a quieter room. Ledgers and route maps were laid open across a table. The discussion began formally, efficiently. Qiao Lan explained supply lines, seasonal risks, port delays, alternative routes through the north. As the discussion continued, Xiaoyan said little, but his gaze remained on her more often than on the maps, not inappropriate, not obvious, but steady, observing, listening, evaluating. Qiao Lan eventually noticed, "Your Highness, is something wrong with the maps?" Xiaoyan answered calmly, "No." "Then, why are you looking at me instead of the ledgers?" For the first time, a faint curve touched Xiaoyan's lips, almost invisible. "Because the ledgers are easier to understand than you." Qiao Lan froze slightly. That answer was unexpected. Her fingers paused over the parchment. Xiaoyan continued, "Most people who survive betrayal either become bitter or broken. You became sharper." His voice remained low, measured, but every word landed heavily. "That is rare." The room fell quiet. Qiao Lan's chest tightened slightly. No one had ever said such words to her. No one had looked past the surface and seen the battle underneath. Not her husband, not Madame Pei. No one. Xiao Yan's gaze softened just slightly. The Pei family discarded treasure and mistook it for burden. Something warm stirred in her chest, small, faint, dangerous, because after years of cold neglect, someone had finally seen her worth, not as wife, not as daughter-in-law, but as Qiao Lan, just Qiao Lan. The alliance between the Qiao family and the northern trade routes progressed smoothly. Over the following days, meetings between Qiao Lan and Prince Xiao Yan became more frequent. Most discussions remained strictly business, trade routes, shipping costs, seasonal risks, profit margins. Everything was handled with efficiency, but even within those formal meetings, something subtle had begun to shift. Xiao Yan gradually noticed more than just her business talent. He noticed her composure, her discipline, and the quiet loneliness hidden beneath her calm exterior. Meanwhile, Qiao Lan began noticing something as well. Xiao Yan never treated her as someone fragile, nor did he look at her with pity. He respected her opinions, listened when she spoke, and gave weight to every word she said. It was unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. One afternoon, after concluding a trade discussion, the two stepped out of the trading house together. Winter sunlight fell softly across a stone path. Their conversation remained light, still about business, yet no longer as distant as before. At that moment, a carriage stopped nearby. A familiar figure stepped down, Pei Jingyuan. His footsteps halted the moment he saw them, Qiao Lan, standing beside another man. His expression stiffened immediately. A strange discomfort rose in his chest, sharp, unpleasant. He approached quickly. But the moment he fully recognized Xiao Yan, his body instinctively tensed. He lowered his head at once. "This official greets Your Highness." Xiao Yan only glanced at him briefly. He said nothing, yet that silence alone created immense pressure. Pei Jingyuan straightened slowly. Only then did he look toward Qiao Lan, his voice restrained, but colder than usual. "I did not expect you to be acquainted with His Highness." Qiao Lan's expression remained calm. "That is no longer Lord Pei's concern." Her answer was clean, without hesitation, without emotion. Pei Jingyuan's fingers tightened inside his sleeves. Something in his chest twisted violently. He could not explain item, only that hearing her draw such a clear boundary fearful. Before he could speak again, Xiao Yan stepped forward slightly, just one step, but enough to place himself between them. A subtle gesture, yet unmistakably protective. His voice was low, calm. "Lord Pei, since you understand she is no longer part of the Pei family, you should also understand where your boundaries end." The air froze. Pei Jingyuan's jaw tightened, but he did not dare answer back. This was no ordinary noble. This was Ruyu, the emperor's younger brother, a man even high officials feared offending. Pei Jingyuan could only suppress the anger rising inside him and lower his gaze again. "This official understands." Xiao Yan said nothing further, but the message was already clear: stay away. Pei Jingyuan turned toward Qiao Lan one last time, yet what he saw disturbed him more than Xiao Yan's warning. Qiao Lan looked calm, composed, untouched. There was no trace of longing in her eyes, no pain, no hesitation, as if he had truly become someone insignificant in her world. For the first time, Pei Jingyuan felt something close to panic because he suddenly realized Qiao Lan was no longer looking at him, not as husband, not as regret, not even as resentment. She simply did not care anymore. The Pei mansion no longer held its former dignity. What remained was pressure and silent collapse. Li Ruyu had stopped pretending. The gentle mask she once wore in front of others no longer existed. Her tone no longer softened, her patience no longer appeared. Even basic courtesy toward servants had turned into irritation. Because in her eyes, the Pei family was no longer something worth preserving, only something slowly sinking, and she refused to sink with it. The change did not happen all at once. It surfaced in small cracks. The way she no longer lowered her voice in front of Madame Pei, the way she openly dismissed household problems as inevitable decline, the way she spoke of the mansion as if it were already half dead. Then it escalated. One evening, when reports of another failed trade arrived, her patience finally broke. She no longer hid her frustration, no longer measured her words. Everything she had been suppressing came out at once. Not as grief, but as contempt for the situation, for the household, and for the man who could not fix it. Pei Jingyuan stood in the same room, silent at first, listening, until the words shifted direction. From complaint about circumstances to judgment of him, useless, the word landed clearly, coldly. As if stating a fact rather than an insult, the room fell into a suffocating silence. Pei Jingyuan's expression darkened instantly. Something inside him snapped, not loudly, but sharply. He turned without another word. The door was slammed behind him with force that shook the corridor. He walked straight through the mansion, each step heavier than the last, until he reached the study room. The door closed again, this time more controlled, but still heavy with restrained anger inside. Silence swallowed him. Ledgers lay scattered on the table, reports of decline remained unfinished. Yet his eyes were no longer on them. His mind drifted, uninvited, to another time, another presence. Qiao Lan, a quiet courtyard, warm tea on the table, a woman sitting silently beside him, never raising her voice, never demanding anything, only steady, only enduring. The memory was almost gentle, and that gentleness made it unbearable because in that moment, he realized what he had lost was not just a wife, but the only stability the Pei family had ever truly known. The pressure inside the Pei mansion continued to rise. Day by day, the atmosphere grew heavier. Even the servants had learned to walk more quietly, as if afraid the slightest sound would trigger another conflict. After yet another argument with Li Ruyu, Madame Pei could no longer endure it. For the first time in years, she personally went to the study room to find Pei Jingyuan inside. Ledgers and reports still covered the table, failed trades, delayed payments, withdrawn partnerships, every page carried bad news. Pei Jingyuan had barely rested these past few days. The exhaustion beneath his calm exterior had become impossible to hide. Madame Pei's voice carried restrained anger. She no longer behaves like before, no longer gentle, no longer respectful. Every day brings complaints, every day brings conflict. Pei Jingyuan remained silent, his gaze stayed on the reports, but Madame Pei continued. Her frustration had already built a high. She questions every decision, challenges every household rule. Even servants are beginning to fear her temper. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Madame Pei said something she herself never imagined saying. Back then, Qiao Lan never created this kind of chaos. The words froze the air. Even Madame Pei paused slightly, as if startled by her own admission. Pei Jingyuan's fingers tightened over the ledger. That name again, Qiao Lan. It felt like no matter where he turned, he could not escape her shadow. Her voice lower now, almost tired. I never thought I would say this. But after she left, only now do I understand how much she handled alone. Pei Jingyuan closed his eyes briefly. A dull ache spread through his chest, because he knew. His mother was right. For years, Qiao Lan had absorbed every burden in silence. Household affairs, servants, finances, family harmony. Whenever conflict arose, she solved it quietly before it reached him. Back then, he thought peace was natural. Now he understood, it had never been natural. Qiao Lan had created that peace with her own hands, and he had mistaken her effort for mere duty. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the atmosphere could not have been more different. Inside the Qiao trading hall, Qiao Lan calmly reviewed profit reports. The numbers were excellent. The alliance with Prince Xiaoyan had expanded faster than expected. Northern routes were now stable. Profits continued rising. Several merchants who once abandoned the Qiao family had returned. Success followed one after another. Across from her, Xiaoyan quietly observed, then his gaze shifted toward the tea beside her. It had grown cold. Without a word, he reached out, removed the cold cup, and replaced it with fresh warm tea brought by his attendant. The gesture was simple, natural, yet unexpectedly gentle. Qiao Lan paused. Her eyes fell on the steaming tea, then slowly lifted toward him. For a brief moment, something softened in her expression, not dramatic, not obvious, but real. Xiao Yan noticed it, and the faintest curve touched his lips. Elsewhere, far away in the Pei mansion, a new report arrived. Pei Jingyuan opened it, his expression changed instantly. The Pei family's largest remaining trade route had officially been taken over by the Qiao family. And backed by Ruo Wang, the paper crumpled slowly in his hand. For the first time, the truth struck him with brutal clarity. Qiao Lan had not merely left him, she had risen beyond his reach. Several days later, an imperial banquet was held at the palace. Nobles, officials, and influential merchants gathered under dazzling lights. The grand hall was lively, filled with music, wine, and endless conversation. Among the guests stood Qiao Lan, calm and elegant, her posture graceful, her expression composed. She no longer resembled the silent woman once trapped inside the Pei mansion. Tonight, she carried herself with quiet confidence, and beside her stood Prince Xiao Yan. His presence alone drew countless gazes. Yet what shocked everyone more was his unmistakable attitude toward Qiao Lan. He spoke to her with rare patience, lowered his voice when addressing her, even subtly shielded her from the crowd when nobles passed too closely. It was not intimate enough to be improper, but far too protective to be ignored. Whispers spread quickly through the hall. Not far away, Li Ruyu watched everything. Her smile remained on the surface, but her fingers had already tightened inside her sleeves. Jealousy burned in her chest, hot, sharp, unbearable. How could this happen? How could the discarded former wife stand there like that, radiant, admired, protected by Ruo Wang himself? Meanwhile she, the woman who thought she had won, was standing here watching from afar like an outsider. The bitterness inside her grew stronger. Beside her, Pei Jingyuan had also noticed, but unlike Li Ruyu, his reaction was silence. Heavy silence. His eyes remained fixed on Qiao Lan longer than necessary, as if trying to understand when exactly she had become someone he could no longer approach. At that moment, Li Ruyu turned abruptly, her movement too sharp, too careless. The silk handkerchief in her hand slipped, falling to the polished floor. Before she could bend down, another hand picked it up, long fingers, familiar fingers. Li Ruyu's breath halted, her eyes slowly lifted and froze. For a moment, the noise of the imperial banquet disappeared from her ears. Years seemed to collapse into a single instant. Shen Ziheng, the man standing before her, was the very man who had once sworn to marry her. The same man who later abandoned her, choosing power, status, and a noble marriage over love. Shen Ziheng's expression shifted as recognition surfaced, surprise. Then something deeper. His gaze lingered on her face, slightly too long, as if searching for the woman he once knew, as if realizing she was still just as beautiful, perhaps even more so. He handed the handkerchief back slowly. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment. But that small contact felt dangerous, charged, unfinished. No words were exchanged, none were needed. Because both of them understood, some ties, no matter how deeply buried, never fully disappeared. Pei Jingyuan remained trapped inside endless problems. The Pei family's decline had accelerated. Merchants withdrew, suppliers cut ties, debts continued rising. Even the mansion itself no longer felt peaceful. Every day brought new pressure. Every year brought new headaches. That afternoon, while reviewing yet another report in his study, hurried footsteps approached. A servant entered, visibly shaken. "My lord, someone requests your immediate presence." Pei Jingyuan frowned. "Who?" The servant swallowed hard. "The lawful wife of Shen Ziheng. She says, you must come now." His brows tightened. Why would Lord Shen's wife seek him out? Something felt wrong, very wrong. Without further delay, he followed the servant. The carriage stopped before Yunlai Tea House, a well-known tea house with private upper rooms. But before Pei Jingyuan even entered, he heard it, noise, shouting, something crashing inside a private room upstairs. His expression changed, he moved faster. By the time he reached the room, the door was already half open, and what he saw inside made his entire body freeze. The room was in chaos. A teacup lay shattered on the floor. A chair had fallen sideways. At the center of the room, Shen Ziheng was kneeling. No, almost prostrating himself, his forehead nearly touching the floor, begging desperately before a furious noblewoman, his lawful wife. Her expression was ice cold. But that was not what shattered Pei Jingyuan's world. His gaze shifted toward the corner of the room, and his blood ran cold. Li Ruyu sat collapsed on the floor. Her hairpin had fallen, long hair messy and disheveled around her shoulders. Her clothes were wrinkled, her face streaked with tears. She looked nothing like the elegant woman he once chose. Only panic remained. Only humiliation. Then Shen Ziheng's frantic voice broke the silence. His words came fast, desperate, ugly. He was not protecting Li Ruyu. He was abandoning her, throwing everything onto her to save himself. He claimed she approached him first, claimed she would not let go of the past, claimed he had only been confused for a moment. Each excuse landed like another slap. Li Ruyu stared at him in disbelief. Her lips trembled. Shock replaced tears. The man who once swore eternal love was now trampling her to save his own status. At that moment, she finally noticed a figure at the doorway. Pei Jingyuan, her face drained of all color. Her breathing stopped. No, this could not be happening. But Pei Jingyuan did not move, did not blink. His gaze remained fixed on her, cold, unbelieving. The woman he had chosen over Qiao Lan, the woman he believed was pure, gentle, loyal, had been deceiving him from the very beginning. Silence fell, heavy, deadly. Then Pei Jingyuan took one step forward and everyone in the room felt it. The temperature had changed. Something terrifying had awakened in him. Pei Jingyuan stood frozen for only a moment, but that moment was enough for everything inside him to collapse, not slowly, but violently. All restraint he had been holding for days finally broke. His eyes turned cold, then sharp, then terrifying. He stepped forward in a single motion and grabbed Li Ruyu by the throat. The room froze instantly. Li Ruyu's breath caught. Her hands instinctively reached for his wrist, panic replacing all remaining pride. For a moment, the man she once relied on looked like he might truly end her life. Pei Jingyuan's grip tightened. His voice came low, broken with rage. You ruined everything. Li Ruyu's face turned pale. Shen Ziheng did not move. The nobleman who had once sworn love was still on his knees before his lawful wife, begging, abandoning everything behind him, as if Li Ruyu no longer existed at all. That sight twisted the final thread inside Pei Jingyuan. Then, his hands suddenly released. Li Ruyu collapsed hard onto the floor, coughing, gasping for air, her body trembling uncontrollably. Silence swallowed the room again. Pei Jingyuan stood over her, chest rising sharply, not calm, not victorious, only hollow fury that had nowhere left to go. His voice came again, but colder now. From this moment onward, Li Ruyu is no longer part of the Pei family in any form. Her status is erased, her name removed, her existence disconnected from this household. A pause. Then the final sentence fell. Send her to the Southern Exiled House, the place for disgraced women with no identity left to hold. Guard stepped forward immediately. Li Ruyu tried to speak, but only broken sounds came out. She reached toward him, futile, desperate. But Pei Jingyuan did not look at her again, not even once, as she was dragged away. The room became silent again. Pei Jingyuan remained standing, motionless. But something inside him had already collapsed. Not relief, not satisfaction, only emptiness. And in that emptiness, one name surfaced again, Qiao Lan, the one he never should have let go. Inside the Pei mansion, silence had become unbearable. Madame Pei sat in the inner hall for a long time, no longer speaking sharply, no longer commanding anyone, only staring at the empty space where everything had begun to fall apart. For the first time, regret finally surfaced in her voice. Bring her back. Her words were quiet, almost trembling. Bring Qiao Lan back. This house was never meant to lose her. But no one answered with certainty because everyone already understood. Some things, once broken, could not be restored. Still, that same day, Pei Jingyuan left the mansion alone without escort, without announcement, as if something inside him had already decided before his mind could resist. The city was unusually noisy. Servants along the road whispered as he passed, "Too late. The wedding procession has already left. They are heading to the prince's residence." His steps paused, just for a moment. Then he moved faster, as if chasing a thought he refused to believe. The streets grew brighter as he approached the royal district. Red silk banners filled the air. Lanterns swayed in golden light. Music echoed faintly from ahead. And then he saw it, the prince's residence, alive with celebration, crowded with nobles. Drenched in wedding lights and imperial elegance, his breath stopped. Inside, Qiao Lan stood beneath ceremonial red and gold robes, calm, radiant, unshaken, and beside her, Prince Xiaoyan, dressed in full wedding attire, standing as her husband, not as a guest, not as a witness, but as a man chosen by the world she now belonged to. The ceremony continued without interruption, as if his arrival meant nothing at all. Pei Jingyuan stepped forward once, twice, then stopped completely. The distance between them was only a courtyard, but it felt like an entire lifetime. Qiao Lan's eyes shifted toward him, just briefly, a glance, not shock, not sorrow, only calm acknowledgement, as if confirming something already concluded. Then she looked away, returning to the ceremony, as if he had already ceased to exist in her world. Pei Jingyuan's knees weakened, slowly. He fell. Not dramatically, not loudly, just collapsing into silence. The sound of celebration continued behind the gates. Red petals fell like rain, and in that moment, Pei Jingyuan finally understood. He had not been rejected at the wedding. He had been erased long before it ever began. And this time, there was no path left back.